So Capaldi's era has come to an end, really, and I don't quite know how to feel about it sometimes. I often think that this era of Doctor Who should be known as the first series to be very set on watching the Doctor grow and change each season, though whether or not that was intended will probably never actually be known. Sort of similar to how a lot of the 11th Doctor's speeches and moments sort of felt like it was designed to sell the idea that this Doctor is the last incarnation of the Doctor before John Hurt and the War Doctor came to be. Now, what I mean by him growing is that throughout his run, we saw the Doctor go through a lot of changes, and a lot of them reminded me of the character House from the television series House. From his first adventure in Into the Dalek, and for most of season 8, he seems very set on sort of ignoring you while he saves you, as opposed to holding your hand while you die. I think that's his rationale. But at the same time, he questions if he's a good person or not, which sort of calls back to the Sixth Doctor questioning himself on it in the audio play The Marian Conspiracy. He is very set on teaching hard lessons, like when he left Clara in Kill the Moon to decide the fate of the moon, and telling Clara in Flatline that while Clara was an excellent doctor, being good had nothing to do with it. By the end of season 8, after Missy, the Master, presents him with his own army of Cybermen, he realizes that he isn't a good or bad man so much as he's just a man with a screwdriver traveling along and helping where he can. By season 9, we see something very profound in the form of the Doctor seeing himself as someone almost detached from the Doctor, primarily when he refused to save a young boy knowing he was Davros. He almost felt like someone undergoing a midlife crisis or even a crisis of identity, even telling Davros that the Doctor is someone he tries very hard to be. And the idea that people expect him to always have the answers and to be able to save everyone no matter what, something he knows isn't true, and this aspect of the Doctor has always been sort of my favorite. At the same time, in episodes like the girl who died and Hellbent, we saw the Doctor can be very upset when he can't save people, and like his predecessors, when dealing with loss, his first response is to hide himself away. Finally, by season 10, we saw the Doctor dealing with his loss and retirement in the same way the 11th Doctor did, by getting a mystery and a new companion. Here you seem to have fully grown up, almost, being more open and with the same amount of childishness and almost Merlin-like mentoring we've known him for. He's very much set here on trying to change not just himself, but his best friend, former best friend, the Master, currently known as Missy, in a similar way to Missy when offering him a Cybermen army in Death in Heaven, and the two of them making a choice at the end of it. At the end of it all, I think what summed up this Doctor is a lot was the concept of fear. If you think about it, Deep Breath had the 11th Doctor tell Clara how afraid his successor would be, and we saw this fear manifest not just in Listen, where it was the dark, and Heaven Sent, but his refusal to regenerate. And you kind of wonder how long he wants to keep doing this, constantly, dying and changing and losing people. And this was also not just the Doctor looking back on one past incarnation, but his entire previous cycle. He wasn't just carrying the death of Clara and Bill, but of Amy, Rory, River, Astrid, Adric, and many others. It's heartfelt and deep that reminds me of the question that I think is always in Watchmen: what kind of person actually wants to be a hero? But in terms of negatives and positives outside of the Doctor, I'd say it was very evened out. For every horrible handling of Danny Pink or moments of A Shielder Past, The Girl Who Died, and Woman Who Lived, there was Missy and The Return of Osgood. For every Kill the Moon, or Sleep No More, or Hell Bent, there was Mummy and the Orient Express, Face the Raven, and The Doctor Falls. In terms of Danny, it was a problem of him only existing pretty much to die, and a lot of his story felt just sort of tacked on to give Clara something to do. Shielder had the misfortune of constantly showing up, and while her appearance in Face the Raven I felt was brilliant, it was more ruined by Hellbent, which honestly sought to sort of undermine the beauty of Heaven Sent in a lot of ways. Finally, there was Clara, who was sort of stuck in the middle of the positives and negatives of this run. While she had been introduced primarily as a quote-unquote living mystery box in Season 7, Season 8 had her effectively introduced to the Doctor properly, I think. The problem is that a lot of the scripts weren't that strong for her until like halfway through Season 8, as everything else pretty much had her take the role of the Doctor's mother in a lot of ways, and she was still in a lot of ways in the role of the impossible girl all over again. But from the end of Kill the Moon onward, she felt more interesting and more fleshed out, with her dealing with the fact that she wasn't as clever as she thought. Her recklessness causing trouble, and not just the girl who died, but also her death in Face the Raven. Ultimately, I think the 12th Doctor Zera will probably be looked upon later on with a lot more fondness, especially in the coming seasons. I think that's always important. Like, people appreciate a Doctor's era usually more after it's been replaced by another era. But I think what summed up everything good and bad about the 12th Doctor's era was the scene in season 9 where the Doctor comes in playing a guitar on a tank. It was totally awesome. A bit too much, but was a scene to showcase a lot of deep and complex emotions. So coming up to the bad and the good episodes of the 12 Doctors era. Best episodes: Mummy on the Orient Express. I mean, it's a mummy on a train in space feeding on grief. Who can't love that? Magician's Apprentice and Witch's Familiar. Honestly, my favorite interactions with Missy here, and it's always nice to see Davros back. And it was, at the time, we thought the Shades would only last for those 2 episodes. Face the Raven, the Doctor in a smashingly awesome coat. Love that coat. He was like he was totally channeling the 3rd Doctor for that. And of course, the death of Clara, which, while I never thought I would enjoy Clara's death, it was beautifully handled, beautifully shot, just great world enough and time / the Doctor falls. I love a good Cyberman story. I'm not too excited about the Quasi-Monda story, but whatever. Just the idea of the Doctor fighting a planet of Cybermen and coming out on top, and then having a companion legitimately die again, and not have it be totally 100% ruined. But okay, that ending's a bit weird, but it was still cool. Missy and the Master felt like a nice little nod to the story of the 2 Masters from Big Finish, which I think did this a bit better, but whatever. And finally, Heaven Sent. Heaven Sent has to be one of my all-time favorites, just because it's the Doctor dealing with the loss of a companion. And it's not the sort of pouty way, or sort of like obviously sad way that we saw the 11th and 10th Doctors do, which was equally powerful, to be clear. But the idea was that this is a castle, and like the episode itself, the entirety is about the grief. Usually the Doctor sort of grieves for like a few minutes, and then he's in a story where someone has to get him out of it. This time, it's just the Doctor and his emotions. And now, coming off to worst episodes, Kill the Moon. Oh, especially Kill the Moon. How do we ruin a simple concept and a really great ending? So the concept and the ending of this episode, I think, are really great, but everything in between, the fact that I can't remember these characters' names, and just sort of the fact that, this circular argument, just, there had to be a better way to get to that same point, but whatever. The Woman Who Lives story, which I felt was just well-meaning. The first half of that episode, I think, is really good. Like, every moment with the Shield of talking about her past, I think is really great. Sleep No More actually put me to sleep. Not even joking. Every time I watch it, I fall asleep. Alright, not even a good sleep. I sort of wake up like, I watched that. That was... Empress of Mars. Empress of Mars is not entirely terrible, but mostly forgettable. It's one of Mark Gatiss' weaker ones, I think. I mean, it has a lot of fun stuff in it. I love not a good Ice Warrior story, for the most part. Good setup, but just dull. And finally, Hellbent. An amazing premise here. It turns out it involves the Time Lords. It involves the hybrid story attempting to pay off. It involves an extraction chamber, the General regenerating, a classic TARDIS, and it's all ruined by the hybrid. Even though Maester Luwin is Rassilon, just just so bad. Like, the first 30 minutes of it are really, I think, the best parts of it. But once we get to Clara in the extraction chamber, the entire story changes, and it's no longer about this interesting mystery. So with that in mind, we're going to bring this video to a close here. If you had a favorite, least favorite things about the 12th Doctor's era, leave that down in the comments section, and I will catch you all later. This is the Bucket Think Tank signing out. May your fandom serve you well.